Hey, Bulls and Bears. It happened again. I'm seeing a lot more stories like this. And we started talking about this at the beginning of the shutdown recession. And when the rental moratoriums were first rolled out, we told you that we're likely going to see a lot more situations come up where there's violence. And we've documented several of them. But here's the latest. And this one's out of Newsweek. Las Vegas landlord shot 3 of his tenants to avoid the eviction process. So here's another landlord that's going to get free housing in some jail somewhere in a prison. And I just wonder why people think that this is the answer. Violence is not the answer. They're only going to get themselves in trouble. They hurt other people. But when people lose everything, they lose it, right? Or what's the other saying? When people have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And we're seeing more and more people, and landlords are part of this, getting closer and closer to the end of the rope. They cannot kick these tenants out legally with this moratorium. And this is just another sad ending to the situation that's brought about by this quote unquote economic rescue program, where we have forbearances, moratoriums, forgiveness. From this article here, district attorney said that homeowner Orlando Lorenzo Sanchez, 78, wanted to handle it, quote unquote, his way. And let's talk about this again. I know we've talked about this a few times, but there's a lot of new people joining the channel. The solution is to let prices fall where they may. If they just get rid of the eviction moratorium, rents will automatically correct to what people can afford to pay. So if a landlord is asking too much for rent and people don't want to pay it, or a tenant can't pay it, then they're going to have to lower the rent. It's as simple as that. But when you have millions of apartments, homes occupied by people not paying, that throws everything out of proportion. And it's even going to have an inflationary impact on home prices. Because when rents are so inflated, you start looking at buying a home instead of just renting. Because you see the outrageous cost of rent. So if you let the market determine what the prices should be, if you stop interfering, if you stop passing all these crazy, stupid laws, you can fix this. And people say, oh, we can't kick these people out of their homes. They wouldn't have to get kicked out if rents were lowered. More people could afford the rent, but they're messing around with the market. There's something called a free market where buyers and sellers dictate what the price is. Right now we have other forces that come in and also throw everything out of proportion too, like buyers that really shouldn't be buying, people just taking on debt in order to become a buyer. And that goes into fractional banking and lots of other issues. But this moratorium is going to just make things worse. And we're seeing rents continue to rise. Let's talk about what's happening in New York. And looking at New York Times right here, I guess they don't want me to read the full article. They want me to pay. New York City rents rise even as thousands struggle to pay. Right? So even though rent is so unaffordable and so many people can't afford it and can't pay it, rents are still rising because everything is thrown out of proportion when you have this type of intervention. And let's look at this article right here. This is out of the Dallas Fed, the Fed Bank of Dallas. Surging home prices expected to propel rent increases, right? It's not rocket science. So when you have high home prices, more people look to rent. When rents are high, more people look at the option of buying. And at least the Fed, they got something right in this article. So basically, it's a multiplier effect. The high price here forces people there. And guess what? When you have more people forced into a position, you're going to see rising prices. So yes, expect rents to continue to rise, home prices to continue to rise. The banks are not going to pull back on the lending. Right? You would have thought that when home prices reached the level they reached back before the 2008 housing bubble went bust, you would have thought that banks would have started pulling back on the lending, but no, that's not happening. And it's interesting, a lot of the sellers that sold their home, a lot of them have a lot of equity, but what are they doing with it? Most of the time, or a lot of the time anyway, they're going to buy another overpriced place, or they're going to rent a place where they have just outrageous costs of rent, right? So it may seem good to get a big sale price on that home, but where are you going to go? Now, the people that are selling in states like California and then moving out of California, especially moving to places over like the Midwest, Indiana, um, not Illinois, but Indiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, even Ohio, some of those really low price states, that's where the people that are selling their home in California are going to see the most bang for their buck and where they're going to have their equity buy a heck of a lot, right? You could sell a condo in California and get yourself several acres in one of those other states. Right now, speaking of market intervention, market propping, the Fed reversing Fed stimulus too early could be particularly harmful for the economy. Well, of course, because the Fed is the economy. Money printing, loans, debt, that is the economy. Consumption. When the Fed tightens the monetary policy, when they stop easing, everything starts falling apart. But a lot of people are just so confident. They think the Fed is just going to forever back these markets. What's going to happen when the Fed reverses course, either voluntarily or not voluntarily? Right? The Fed could come out next week and they could say, oh, sorry, somebody hacked our systems and we couldn't support the markets anymore. Nobody saw this coming. And maybe it would have been the truth. Maybe there will be some sort of electronic or digital hiccup in the system. We've seen flash crashes before where markets dropped drastically in a very short amount of time. Will it happen? Nobody knows. Look at the countries that saw hyperinflation, a correction, a pullback. The stimulus never stopped in those countries. And here it's taken a lot longer. Yes, we still have the world's reserve currency. About 60% of global trade is still done in dollars. Dollar is still the king, but 60%, the number's getting lower and lower all the time. But these rising prices, it's still looking like this is the beginning of hyperinflation. From this article, Fed Powell said Friday, U.S. economic recovery appears to be making progress, but warned that the central bank needs to be careful not to tighten its policy before enough Americans can return to work. Well, here's the sad part. A lot of the Americans that are returning to work still are barely scraping by, and I'm sure many of them that are not paying their rent are actually working. They're just not making enough to pay the rent. Right? You notice how he says returning to work. What about returning to jobs that can actually pay these outrageous housing costs and cost of living? Another CNBC article, key inflation gauge rises 3.6% from a year ago, the biggest jump since early 90s. Another massive indication of the beginning of hyperinflation. Remember, over 6 months ago, they said it was going to be transitory. Again, more and more data coming out. It's not transitory. It's not going to stop. It may slow down, but it certainly doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. And the 3.6% number, remember, that's a cherry-pick number. The real number is way higher than that. They only look at a small basket of indicators to come up with the official, quote-unquote, official numbers. More rising prices. Chip prices rise 20%. The electronics will have to follow. Get ready to pay more for computers, phones. We know the automobiles take chips. Everything is looking like it's going to continue to rise. And let's wrap it up right here. We know that Afghanistan, we know most of you should know what's going on over there. It is a tragedy. And look at the total bill now, $2.31 trillion spent just in Afghanistan. Right, with all the people here that need help, and I'm not saying that handouts or payouts would have helped the people here, but couldn't we think of a lot better things to do with this rather than go over and spend this type of money on foreign encounters? And even after all this money spent, look what's happening right now. Just epic failures everywhere you look. And somehow people trust these same people that made all these decisions to fix all the messes that we're seeing right now. It's not going to happen, folks. And I hope everyone listening to this is listening to this from a warm, comfy, cozy spot, that you've got a meal to eat. And this country's in a big mess, and we're in for a world of hurt, and I think it's just going to get worse. I wish I had better news for you, but this is what's happening, people. Keep stacking, keep preparing, stay well. Bye for now.